All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited about today to talk about no code analytics engineer, what that even means with Microsoft Fabric. And to get started, I'm just going to go ahead and let's start with a simple introduction. And Shabnam, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit about your story, background, how you got to Power BI, where you got started?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here. My name is Shabnam Watson. I'm a data consultant. I mainly work with Power BI and Microsoft Fabric these days. And I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP as well. I started with programming. So I come from a pro dev background with .NET and Visual Basic. From there, I got involved with SQL Server, writing a program with SQL Server and OLAP services. That was like the great grandfather of Power BI, I think, at this point. And that's where I learned MDX, how to code
Oh
that
boy.
generates MDX. Then I discovered Excel, by the way, pivot tables in the process. And then I was like, why are we writing all this code when Excel can already connect to the cubes and browse them? And from there, I gradually moved towards the data and learned SQL more in depth and Power BI, tabular modeling, and Fabric. So that's kind of my path that I've followed throughout the years.
All right. All right. Awesome. Let me come back to that. Nicola, why don't you give us a little bit of your background?
Sure, sure. Yeah, you could copy
First question,
paste a
why
lot
did you start making music first?
when I was a kid. No, about my introduction. So you could copy paste like most of the things that Shabna mentioned, except the name, of course, and this part uh, with Excel and so on. But yeah, my background is very similar. I also used to work a lot with the relational database in this traditional Microsoft's BI stack, and then I transitioned to Power BI a couple of years ago, and since Fabric was introduced, I moved mostly nowadays I'm working with Fabric because that also includes Power BI as well, right? So yeah, that's about myself.
All right. Mine, you cannot copy paste, unfortunately. I kind of started the other direction, right? So I'm an accidental data professional, CXO, whatever you want to call it. But I started in the land of Excel and pivot table. I actually have a really good joke. The first day I went to work, people are like, "Do you know what's a if statement?" I'm like, "Yes." Have you used a pivot table? I'm like, "No." So my colleague goes like, "Pack your bag, go home." That was my first day at work. That was my introduction to Excel, and obviously, I could have told him that 3 months later. But I am IT and their worst nightmare. I was the Excel junkie, right? So I lived in that role for like finance for 10 years and stuff like that. But at one point, I was like, there has to be a better way to do this. And that's when I first came across Power BI. But guess what? When I went to meet the guys, like, hey, you want to get started? You know what? Stuff that you want to learn is already in Excel, thing called Power Pivot and Power Query, right? So I started my Power BI journey actually in Excel. Like my first model was actually the Excel Power Pivot, and then because I started in 2016 and whatnot, so then migrated to Power BI pretty quick and fast and whatnot. Um, that's kind of my background. But what I want to kind of highlight as we kind of go through is that if you notice, Shabnam and Nicola both come from pro code background. I come from no code background. I guess if you count Excel as code, I was a pro coder as well, but Excel pro coder, right? So I think that's kind of the background. But today we want to kind of talk about what the landscape looks like. And all clarity, I'm not killing anybody to get out of Excel. That fight will never gonna win. Rather, kind of embrace it, but use it for the right reason. But that's not kind of the premise of today's presentation. Today's presentation is our kind of the webinar is the idea that what do we scale from where we are today. But to do that, let's kind of look at how we got here, right? At this point, Shabnam, Nicola, is there any doubt in the market that Power BI is the reigning champ when it comes to business intelligence?
If you ask Gartner, not.
Well,
Yeah,
this,
great partner.
but the simplest way I think right now, I think when I started in Power BI, uh, Microsoft was in the leader quadrant, right? But they were not the leader, right? I think that was led by Tableau and Click at that point. But as Microsoft kind of put it out, this 18 years in a row they have been in the quadrant, and the last 5 and 6 years, Microsoft has pretty much been dominating the top, not only the in the quadrant, but has been the leader. And from that perspective, I think it is great, right? But the challenge, however, is the life cycle of data tends to be lot larger than just a BI workload. It is true that Power BI is a superset of all the BI capabilities that you would want. However, at the same time, it is not end all be all when it comes to data solutions when we work on it, right? So, as I kind of mentioned that, I think what are the scaling challenges you have faced, Shabnam? Right. So, like from a Power BI perspective, what are the challenges you have faced in terms of scaling the full solution where you had to leverage other stuff to get to the end?
Yeah, so with Power BI, as much as I love Power BI, the for data integration part, we have Power Query, and that's great for some transformations for smaller projects. But when you're working with larger projects, there's a point where you want to do your ETL or your ELT outside of Power BI. So you need an additional tool there to go with it.
I can relate to that, right? So I think one of the challenge we faced with like using data flows and stuff like that, you cannot share data flow naturally, right? You have to kind of put them in different workspaces, or people gets access to all of it. There's no concept of row level security and whatnot. Even from a sharing perspective, I think Power BI is amazing when it comes to sharing the insight, but when it comes to sharing the data, it's I don't think it's the best situation from that perspective, right? um, I guess kind of staying on that, Nicola, right? There are things that we can try to do in Power Query or Power BI, and we have this famous saying from Matthew Roche about Roche's maxim, right? Things can be done upstream as possible, as downstream as necessary.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
you must have been missing your being the muscle to use your SQL, right?
True to be said, yes, yes, that's correct. But the fact that someone knows SQL is, in many cases, not enough. Sometimes you also have issues with permissions, like who is allowed to access the data source directly and write SQL or write whatever type of code in the backend. So it's both about knowing how to code, but also being able to self-serve yourself, and that's where I think that Power BI brought the immense value, the biggest value to let's say
That's
democratize this BI world to everyone.
Yeah.
That's
So I
true.
think
That's also been my experience. So we go to the back end when you can, if you have the permissions. But if you don't, if I'm working somewhere where that structure is not in place, then Power Query can do a lot. So in that sense, I agree with Nicola. It's been really good.
perfect. So, what if we could have this fragmented data in one place that we could even self serve that portion that we're missing to be able to enhance and take Power BI to the next level, right? I think those are the challenges that I think was born. And from there, we got like, so just a personal anecdote from my perspective. When I was head of data analytics and whatnot, I got my Power BI project was so successful that I didn't get an option. No good deed goes unpunished. I got dragged into IT to head the data, and I was like, wait a minute, I have to figure all this other stuff out. And I was kind of, as I was kind of doing that, um, I came to realize, like, to make my Power BI project more successful, I need to be able to serve data much better, and I cannot do that with a fragmented data estate, right? And from that perspective, this was 4 year, 5 years ago. I had to build a data platform. So we didn't have platforms back then, but data warehouse and stuff like that. And I did not do this on a Microsoft stack, funny enough, because that was not a really good option at that point, right? But with that, we have a new kid on the block, Shabnam. I mean, want to tell a little bit about Microsoft Fabric for those of people that doesn't know what Fabric is?
So Microsoft Fabric gives you pretty much any capability that you need to do a data project of any kind. So when you start a data project, the first thing is for you to ingest data from somewhere or access it. So that's your data integration. It's got that covered. It's got the Power BI covered, which is your analytics part, your reporting part. And then it also gives you various SQL capabilities, various access to for pro code developer and no code developer, low code developer. So it's an end-to-end software as a service platform. So think of it like today you have Power BI in your workspace. You can create reports and models. Now, if your environment is Fabric enabled, you can create a SQL database next to it. You can create a warehouse, a lakehouse, everything that you need. You can create it all in one place, covered by the same permission model, same security. So it's really an end-to-end platform for complete projects. And it continues to use the simple user interface that Power BI has with Power BI service. So I find it very intuitive to work with and extend my knowledge from Power BI to use the other parts of it as well. So that's why I usually introduce Microsoft Fabric.
That's a good example. I mean, and I think if you look at it since it came out, right? Um, that's quite the growth, you would say, right? So this is Power BI's growth. I kind of got started somewhere over here, right? But like in November, the Fabric went in GA, and if you noticed, Power BI and Fabric has maintained that growth, right? Um, One of the key things today's presentation today is about is look at this number of Power BI developers, right? The number of people developing in Power BI. Nicola, you train a lot of people. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is humongous number. So yeah, I'm not sure about the source for that number. Probably that's something from Microsoft, so we can trust them. My experience is that a lot of people, yeah, of course, no, nothing bad with that. So a lot of people are transitioning and learning Power BI. So probably this number totally makes sense. And uh, as this graph displays, it's a constant growth. So it's not that they reach 7 millions and then it's 7 million. So but it's constant growth. That's something that I think makes Power BI yeah, leading tool for business reporting.
Now, I have a follow-up question for that for you, Nicola, right? And this is a statement that if I want to say that if we take the entire 7 million people, right, how many of the people are citizen developers or low code, no code people rather than more of Nicola and Shabnam?
Yeah, there was a slide I remember when Fabric was introduced back then, almost a year and a half ago. I remember there was a slide, and I think Kim from Microsoft was talking through the slides, and there was one slide that showed that like 70 or 75% of people are citizen developers out of the entire pool, you know. So maybe it was even more than that, but I remember that it was very high number. So basically I would say that majority of developers who are working with these tools nowadays are citizen developers.
And now that's the question, and that's the foundation for today's thing is like, how does someone take their Power BI skills and leverage Fabric. Where do they get started? What it means, right? So I think this was the underlying questions that we were trying to answer, and then we created a tribe partnership between Shabnam, myself, and Nicola to see what is the foundational places that you can take your Power BI knowledge and take it to the next step to build something that is scalable, sustainable, and secure.
Yeah, because you mentioned when should where should people start? Start here. That's why we are here today.
Yeah, sounds good. So that's kind of the idea today, right? We're gonna look at your persona from Power BI developer, no code, low code. So whatever skill you have, Power Query and whatnot, take that skills to the next level, and you get to call yourself something cooler, analytics engineer, right? So I went to school for economics, so nobody would have expected me to be an engineer, but look at me now. I even passed the DP 600. But that was probably more for
Great
following
job.
Nicholas. Shabnam, you're saying something?
I just said great job. Congratulations. That's
I took the risk. I did it in the beta and got passed. Now I just have to make sure that I continue to pass the retake, but it tends to be a little bit easier. With that, let's jump right in, right? So first of all, I think we want to understand some foundational concepts as we kind of go through. Shabnam kind of highlighted a little bit of it because we kind of look at Power Query, data model, and visualization perspective. We need to kind of open our mindset to a slightly more IT term. It's very similar concept, but it's more structured approach to something. And like from that perspective, Shabnam, if you want to give us an idea about what this means from just having semantic models and reports to having all this different stuff in our workspaces.
yeah. So um talking about scale and the sharing aspects that you mentioned before. So today you can use Power Query within Power BI to do a lot of your ETL. Like Nicholas said, if you don't have access to the upstream databases or data sources to do it upstream, you can do a lot of it in the Power BI model itself. But then, other than Power BI, outside of Fabric, other tools cannot reach it with like SQL. You cannot hit the same data with SQL. So there are some limitations that limits the usability of it outside of Power BI reports. So with Fabric now, you can take that ETL out of your, or ELT, out of your Power BI, the Power Query, and you can put it next to it. So that's where in Fabric you can have pipelines that you're going to use to orchestrate your data flow. So orchestration just means the fancy word for some people. If you haven't heard of it before, it just means you're going to define the flow of logic and you're going to schedule it to run in a predefined order. That's what orchestration is. And so all of that together next to your Power BI items, not embedded in them. So that's how I define the extra Fabric items.
No, I think that's a really good background, right? So I think about the old days. The orchestrator was us doing it manually,
That
going and
too.
figuring
Yeah.
out refresh this at this time, refresh that at that time, and then go refresh this. Versus now we can schedule it and orchestrate multiple logics. If it fails, do this and whatnot. All the brute force that we had to do now, it gets a lot easier.
Yes. And some of Fabric capabilities before were available in the platform as a service tools like Azure Data Factory, but now it is even more simplified. So it's covered. You don't have to go to a separate product to get that piece done. You can get it all done in one interface, which is Power BI service. Especially if you're coming from a Power BI background, you should be already familiar with it.
Makes perfect sense. All right, so that's kind of like think about from an items perspective, we have different items that allows us to as Shabnam pointed out earlier, end-to-end analytics journey from different use case perspective, right? We're not going to spend a lot, like entire time in theory. We're going to show you how this is done so that you can take that away from here. But before that, we want to just kind of cover some foundational. The next one you're going to hear a lot is medallion architecture. Nicola, what is a medallion architecture?
First of all, it's not an architecture; it's a design pattern.
There you go.
No, that's my personal opinion. So I don't
Perfectly fine.
personally like this. You know my opinion. Yeah, but other than that, let's use this medallion architecture as an architecture because it's a mainstream thing, and probably nowadays the main approach for organizing and structuring your data within Microsoft Fabric. Uh, Essentially, what's the idea behind medallion architecture? Uh, yeah, thanks. The idea is to have multiple layers inside your data storage. So intentionally not mentioning lake house or warehouse. It depends where you want to store the data, but the overall idea is the same. So it's kind of a logical separation of different layers inside that storage, where each of these layers provide a certain quality of your data. So you start with the lowest level of quality. This is bronze layer or raw layer, uh,
So if I was
where
mining for gold, this is me shoveling out raw materials from the ground with everything in it.
I love that. Yeah, yeah. I love these icons. Yeah. So essentially, the idea of bronze layer is you connect to your data source, whatever it is. You bring this data and store it somewhere in your lake house or warehouse, and you don't do anything basically with the data. You keep it as is in its raw form. Why is this important? Well, in many cases, you use this as a kind of an archive of all the original data that you loaded from somewhere. So in case you need to reprocess something after some time, you don't need to connect to source one, source two, source three, but you already have this data inside your Microsoft Fabric, and then you can reprocess it from there. Uh, then we have the next level of quality of this data is called silver, or it's also called validated or transformed, as you said here. Basically, in this layer, we are cleaning and validating the data. So that means, for example, handling data quality issues like missing data, duplicates, adding some columns for validation, and so on. And once you store the data inside the silver layer, it's already ready for downstream consumption. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's in optimal shape for your Power BI semantic models. We will come in a few seconds to explain this. But generally speaking, this data is cleaned and conformed, and it can be trusted downstream. That means that your data scientists, machine learning engineers can connect to your silver layer directly, and then they can perform their regular tasks on top of that data. For gold layer or curated layer, this is the one that's kind of icing on the cake, which provides the highest level of data quality. Also includes some specific business logic, business calculations, aggregations, and so on. When we talk about Fabric specifically, in most cases we are building star schema, so Kimball style star schema in that gold layer, because as probably all of you know, Power BI loves star schema, and that's where we are basically creating a blueprint for Power BI semantic models. So your data flows through different layers of quality checks from bronze layer to the gold layer. That's the idea behind medallion design pattern.
Perfect. So the good part is we can start on the curated side, and then if we need another additional column and stuff like that, we can easily get it from transform, right? And then if a data scientist was kind of working on it, now that we have that, and then it's like, well, I can't answer this, I need to do some feature engineering and stuff like that, they can pop that, get it from the raw, because we never really got rid of all the like additional columns and things like that, even though we might not need it for a data set or things like that, right?
Yep, yep.
All right. So with that said, this is one of my favorite features, and I'm gonna add like another thing around medallion and like as Shabna mentioned from just a different concept perspective. For I have a finance background, right? So one of the people that's in finance and accounting, you have to deal with audit, right? This is one of the key advantage of the medallion design, right? See, Nicola, I even say design, not architecture, right? If your architecture is based on medallion design, what happens
I mean,
is
it's not an architecture. That's why I'm not calling it architecture. But then
that bad.
again, that's my opinion. So
You're good. You're good. So now, so from this design, what this allows us to do is it gives us lineage of the data, so that when we are facing an audit, how did we get to the data? We can have the data in the most raw format, and each of the transformation that we have done downstream has a lineage and the full code, right? It is not stuck between all the VLOOKUPs and all the find and whatever you ran on Excel spreadsheet. You can still serve the final data in Excel, but when the data comes from the curated layer, which can be a Power BI model and things like that, it is validated and trustworthy. Now, this feature is called task flow. This is one of the items in Fabric now. So if you're even in Power BI Workspace, this is the first thing that pops up. And to be honest, this is probably the most no-code feature of that's out there that everybody should use. It's essentially almost like a flow diagram, right? Workflow diagram, and how the data is kind of coming through and whatnot. And what we're going to show you today essentially is, for example, we're going to have bring in data from CRM, some data from ERP, and some data from SharePoint and Excel. Who doesn't have Excel and SharePoint, right? And we're going to orchestrate the entire way through. And this is a very nice pictorial way to doing it. And
Mhm.
the best part of it, this is not a demo thing. This is real thing that we took a snip of, which we'll kind of show you maybe a little bit later. Um, with that said, let's talk about creating the first one, right? So before we can ingest data in, uh, how difficult is it to create a lake house, Nicola?
3 clicks away. That that difficult, yeah. So really, that's one of the most straightforward tasks in Fabric.
Any thoughts on that, Shabnam?
So generally creating an item in Fabric is super easy. It goes very fast, and you can create the item. Of course, it's going to be empty. You have to put data in it, but it's very quick to create them. What I like about task flows, it's like what you plan to do. It's like you come to your job in the morning and you decide, write down all your goals for the day or your roadmap for your week or month, and that's how I look at it is you plan what you're going to do, you see the big picture, and then you go in and create those items for each one of those boxes that you see.
All right. But now let's do some more fun, Shabnam. We're going to bring in data from other places, right?
Mhm.
So let's get data from few different places, right? So IT have been graciously say, hey, we have this some ADLS Gen 2 data and whatnot, and there's some SharePoint stuff. There's some data we use Snowflake and whatnot. How can we bring the data in, right? So in the old days, we'll just use Power Query, get data flow and whatnot. But you want to give us a little bit idea about what we're doing here?
So again, most of this can be done with low code, no code, which means you're just clicking. You're not writing anything from scratch. When there is a little bit of writing going on, it's more like getting a property of ADLS Gen 2. For example, we're getting the shared access key here, and then we put it in the dialog to connect to ADLS Gen 2 and start bringing our data in. So it's generally very easy to do. So let's see the next
So that's the
one
beauty,
is,
right? So now
yeah,
with that, we have the data coming in, right? So
yes.
this in Fabric we call creating a shortcut, right? And what is the difference between a shortcut and a data flow?
A shortcut, you're just pointing to a distant place. You're not actually moving the data. With the data flow, you're moving the data into Fabric. You're moving it physically from one location to another. With the shortcut, you're just creating a way for yourself to access it remotely.
So which means when the data updates, I don't have to run a refresh. It's already updated, right?
That's right. That's right.
So we have done two things. We have not even moved the data, but we made it visible. I will kind of ask a question to Nicola is the requirements for shortcuts tables, right? It has to be in Delta Parquet, correct?
Not necessarily. You can create shortcuts to files as well.
Yes, but
So
for the tables, to make it visible as tables, it has to be Delta Parquet,
uh,
correct?
or Iceberg. Also, Iceberg is
Okay, yeah.
supported for shortcuts. Yeah. So yeah.
But think about this way, right? If you have an IT team or somebody has built something, now you can leverage them in its full power. Don't have to use a data flow to kind of bring it again and again and whatnot, right? So
Totally,
that's
totally.
the
Shortcuts
perspective
are
of
one of
that.
my favorite features in the entire Fabric. So I'm totally in love with shortcuts.
I'm there with you. We actually ended up building cloud FinOps dashboard for one of the people we're working with, where they had data in Azure and AWS, right? We just shortcutted both data from S3 and Azure data lake, and then it just worked like nothing, right? The next one, Shabnam, you can give us a little bit details, but this is our good old Power
So
Query.
yes, so data flows Gen 2. Again, I like to make the analogies for people to make it easier to understand. So gives you the power of Power Query with the scale of Fabric compute behind it. So it's a more powerful version of Power Query in terms of scale, but it gives you the same functionality where you can do clicks and walk your way through the ingestion process. So that's what we are doing here. We're getting data from an Excel source, and then we're bringing it in. One difference between data flows in Fabric, which are called data flows Gen 2, and data flows, as you may know them from Power BI, is that once you bring the data with data flows into Power BI, that's only Power BI can use it. But with this one, you can put the data in a warehouse, in a lake house. You can put it in many places, Azure SQL database. So it's a lot more practical.
That's awesome. So that means it kind of helps us with the sharing a little bit as well, right? Because
Yes,
now
absolutely.
it's not limited to Excel because you get a SQL endpoint, meaning you can take it to anywhere and everywhere you want.
Yes. So the beauty of Fabric is that people with different skill sets can work side by side. Pro code and low code developers can work side by side in the same environment.
Awesome. So the last one, like we have some more data in our current Snowflake implementation, and we have another Azure SQL, right? And this allows us to bring mirror and maybe Nicola, like how do we explain mirror to somebody versus shortcut?
Yeah, these two are very similar. So obviously, different data sources are supported between mirroring and shortcuts. So you can't create shortcut to, for example, Snowflake or Azure SQL DB, and vice versa. You can't mirror data that is in ADLS Gen 2 or for example, what did you show? I forgot. But for example, in Amazon S3. The main difference is that a shortcut doesn't move any data into Fabric, so it's just a virtualized representation of the data. Whereas with mirrored, you create a real-time replica of your data inside Fabric, which means that you physically move data into Fabric when you use mirroring. That's the main difference, and also data sources that are supported.
So the way I would, if I summarize my understanding, right, in mirroring scenario, it's almost like a shortcut, except there's a duplicate of the data, but the data moves on its own, meaning like I don't have to still run data flow or something like that and schedule refresh to get the data.
Exactly, it's automatically
Mhm.
replicated in Fabric. That's That's the main benefit. So no pipelines, no data flows, no ETL, nothing. You just enable mirroring in Fabric, and everything happens automatically in the background.
So for the folks in Power BI devs, as you go tell your IT friends, like now you know how to do CDC, change data capture, log based data syncing. That's what mirroring is in the back end, right? But again, the idea, like as both Nicola and Shabnam, we have been highlighting that these are amazing capabilities that were only in the hands of pro code developers and data engineers and whatnot. As Fabric makes it more SaaS over time, it just simplifies getting access to the data, removing the non-value added task a little bit so that we can get to the value faster. All right, let's see. So now we're gonna do, like I think Shabnam was talking about it earlier. Shabnam, let me kind of throw you another question. You mentioned ETL versus ELT because we had just switched over here to ELT. And like, how do you position that?
So with ETL and ELT, I think Nikolai read somewhere you wrote that, hey, you guys just move the letter around. Isn't that all you're doing?
Yeah, one letter makes the big difference.
Yeah. So I don't know exactly up to what tier, but the general practice was you bring your data in, you have to do you extract, you transform the data into a structured format, like a table, rows and columns, and then you store it, because we had traditional databases like SQL Server or Oracle. That's where you bring the data. So you have to transform it structured before you put it. And then with the cloud storage and all the paradigm shift to lake houses, what came with it is that now you can bring your data in the form of raw files. They can be in JSON format. They can be semi-structured. You can put all of them in your storage. So you extract, then you load them, and then you can leave them there. And then from that point on, you can use various methods to transform them. You can use a notebook. You can use SQL scripts. You can use other methods to transform the data. So again, that's a simple analogy for ETL and ELT next to each other. And what make this ELT makes it possible for you to be able to access data faster again. And you can point your data scientists to the raw data so they can enrich it faster. Everybody can work next to each other in one environment.
Perfect. So now here, again, there are many ways to go about it, but Shabnam, we are using the thing that we know and love already because this is the portion that we're trying to stay with the no code required, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just like that, we can get data from Lakehouse.
Yes. And so all of the Fabric engines, they write the data in the same format that all of them understand. So you can write the data with one of them, store it in one, but you can read it with the others. And that's, again, is a nice feature of Microsoft Fabric, is that your data is independent from the engine that wrote it. It's all open Delta Parquet format.
So now essentially we have the data in raw, which is in real time, and now we have used data flow to get the data into the transform layer, right? So from there, we in this scenario, like what we are using as the final curated one is a data warehouse, and there's probably a long article about whether to use a lake house or a warehouse, but in my philosophy, you can use them interchangeably. And this is one example we're kind of showing that how you can use them interchangeably. But from here, we're going to talk about one more feature that is specific to Fabric This is for Power BI. This is a Power BI capability, but this is only specific to Fabric. You do not get this in Power BI Pro or Premium per user, and that is called Direct Lake Model. And Nicola, you wanna explain it to us how we should look at Direct Lake, maybe
Yeah,
what it
sure.
is and how we should look at it and when it makes sense and everything?
Sure. So, yeah, Direct Lake was born in an attempt to uh, resolve, let's say, some disadvantages of both import and direct query modes that existed before Fabric, and they still exist, and they're absolutely relevant. So when you use import mode, basically we have two problems with import mode. We have data duplication, because essentially you are moving data that is stored somewhere else. You are moving it and storing it again inside Power BI semantic model. So think of a big fact table of 100 million records. You have these 100 million records stored again inside your Power BI semantic model. That's one downside. Another downside is data latency, because when you load the data into Power BI semantic model, you need to keep this data in a fresh state. That means you need to connect again to your data source and pull the latest data and load it again into Power BI semantic model. Uh, on the other side, of course, performance is incomparable. When we talk about import mode, it's the best possible performance you can get for your Power BI generated queries. Direct queries solves these problems with data duplication and data latency, but performance, let's say that it's not the best. Let's put it that way. So the idea with direct lake is, let's use the logic behind direct query. So we are not moving any data into Power BI semantic model. So there is no latency, there is no duplication. Data stays inside your delta table within one lake in Microsoft Fabric. But because it's stored in this delta parquet format, which stores the data in the background in a very similar way to how data is stored when you use import mode, it doesn't require too much effort to translate this data into the format that Power BI's internal database, which is called Vertipa, can understand and read the data. So that's the basic idea behind Direct Lake. Data stays in one lake, but during the query, data will be pulled from one lake and loaded into a memory. And from that moment, once the data is loaded into a memory, it behaves exactly the same as import mode. So it's in Vertipack, it's in compressed format and everything else. So that's why we talk about performance, which is close or sometimes even the same as with import mode, but without moving data.
Awesome. So the way, before I say anything, like Shabnam, what's your thoughts on Direct Lake?
Oh, I love it. I love it. It's the best feature of Fabric. um, because if you've ever spent hours loading an import model, which gives you, to this day, that gives you the absolute best performance. But if you spend hours loading millions of records into an import model, and then you compare that with the direct lake, which there's no data movement, and it gives you performance that's super close to import, you'll understand the feeling of how much time it saves you. And it's incredible. I think for me that's the most revolutionary part of Microsoft Fabric, is what they did with Power BI's engine that can directly understand the files in the lake.
So I guess we get the performance of an import with the freshness of a direct query. I think that's kind of, if I take away from it, right? And I do have, I was very like, I jumped on the direct lake bandwagon much later. I was still like import first. If import doesn't work, then I'll go to direct lake. But as things progress, this is not as much for the standard Power BI folks, but as you kind of progress higher, building from a scalable perspective, Direct Lake will become your savior, because you don't have to build composite models, you don't have to duplicate the data. Maybe you have the same customer table in 10 different places, and customer only updates twice a day, but the other model only updates every minute, right? So you don't want to refresh everything at the same time. You can orchestrate them individually and things like that, right? So With that,
I would
let's
just want to make clear one thing. So, because we have people used to think that let's move everything then to direct lake. Don't. If you have import models that work fine, that then just leave them. Don't touch them. No reasons except if you have some issues with refreshes or yeah stuff like that, and some of things that Khaled mentioned. So direct lake is not a replacement. It's just another option. That's what I like to think about direct lake. It's just another option that doesn't fit all scenarios, same
Yes.
as import and direct query, but there will be some scenarios in where direct lake makes more sense than going import or direct query.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think
So it has some limitations, and I just want to add that it gives you the near performance of import mode with the near real time, near real time of
yeah,
direct
real
query.
time,
You have
correct.
to keep that in mind. It's not 100% match, but it's very close to the point where a lot of times it's worth giving up those couple of seconds or milliseconds because it can work with massive amounts of data.
And I want to kind of extend that point both Nicola and Shabda mentioned, right? So if you didn't have a central data hub, you can build a central data hub and you're in Pro and Premium per user, whichever you're using, you can just bring the data from Fabric directly, right? So and leverage all the benefits of Fabric without putting a compute strain from that perspective, right? So from that perspective, I am still, like I said, for me, it was very little tendency toward direct link, but I have obviously started to change a little bit with the new feature set and whatnot. But the folks that are worried in Power BI Premium, right? So this is a very like for large companies that you are in Power BI Premium, that you're already using premium capacities. In those scenarios, you actually get a significant boost in performance when you go to Direct Lake. Because think about if you have a Power BI model that's refreshing every 30 minutes or an hour, right? And then people are using it. So you'll notice the largest consumption of your capacity actually goes to the model refresh, not even the usage, right? Versus by making a direct lake, you just take that process completely out of the picture, right? And if you have 10 models pulling the same data, even better, right? So significant performance improvement from that perspective, right? Um, so do we need code to make a direct lake model, Nicola?
Not really. So you can create direct lake model, yeah, the same way as you used to do before Fabric. Now with this new direct lake on one lake option that was introduced 2 months or two ago, you can use Power BI Desktop to create the model. Previously, it was not possible. You had to use web user interface. Now it's possible also from Power BI Desktop. So the entire workflow, the entire process, yeah, doesn't have any difference compared to what we used to do before Fabric.
And you know what's kind of funny that I notice is that there's two things happening. Power BI Desktop is getting direct lake capabilities, right? And Power BI Service is starting to pick up Power BI Desktop's capability, right? But
Yeah,
like now like it's coming out, it's not out yet. Like we can run Power Query and import a model in Power BI Service now.
yeah, that's a big step. Yeah.
All right. So with that, let's kind of go talk about the like from a recap perspective, Shabnam, like we kind of showed this task flow at the beginning, right? Now we have kind of brought in data, right? Like a data engineer, which is real time, fresh CDC, doing all kind of automagically bringing data in without copying and stuff like that. Where like maybe just kind of walk us through again through the what we did and what the picture was.
Hmm. Yeah, that's why I love task flow because you can come back to it and stay on track. You can remember all the pieces that you worked on. So we brought in data from different data sources. I think you had the SharePoint and you had an Excel file, and then at the same time, we also mirrored some of the data from a data source. And all of that landed in the storage, which is OneLake. And then we were able to access that with Power Query. we did some transformations from there, and then from there we landed it into a warehouse that for us, as part of our medallion design pattern, I want to make sure I don't say architecture, medallion design pattern. Warehouse was the goal layer. And then from there, with Power BI, if you're coming from, again, from a Power BI developer perspective background, you should find yourself right at home. And then the direct lake, as we mentioned, it gives you the best of both worlds with some caveats. So look into those restrictions, make sure if you don't have those few restrictions, then it's a great way to analyze your data.
All right. So now this is more of our standard pattern, what we're used to, right? We wanted to kind of show a little bit more from here what other things we can do, right? So, oh, actually, we forgot about the orchestration, right? So now in the previous one, we did mention that we have this nice little orchestration kind of sitting there, right? And maybe give us a little bit idea about what's orchestration doing.
So orchestration is just scheduling a group of activities in a predefined order, predefined logic, and it's gonna run them on a schedule versus us having to do all those steps one by one. So we have three data, or we have four, you have five data flows there, Khaled. So you're bringing data from different data sources again, and then doing transformations on them once they're in the lake. And then finally, you have a weight there. Do you want to talk about why you have that weight there?
So sometimes we have to so this is used to be the old days. Like this has also changed. We had to introduce wait because there was a slight latency on the back end between the SQL endpoint updating and things like that, right? So this is not kind of the reason there was a wait, and there is the portion that we were originally going to show you in a Power BI model in import mode, and the Power BI model would be triggered refresh. When we switch to direct lake, we forgot to take that part out. But as you can tell, like if you have an end-to-end process on Power BI, you can take it from all the way through, meaning like if you had 5 dependent data flows and then you refresh the model, if you're just using the UI, you had to start 2.5 hours, actually 3 hours before. Do this one, half hour later, do this one, and you were kind of in that process. And this now allows us to kind of take it from like when this succeeds, go to the next step, go to the next step and the next step, and you can do a lot more over here. If it fails, do something else, notify me and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. You can post messages to Teams or email even, all of that is built in. It's great.
Yeah. Awesome. So from there, let's go talk about, see, when I say SQL makes Shabnam and Nicola happy and makes me scared.
No code SQL. That. How that can stand in one sentence?
Well, let's find out. So in this scenario, right? So we're same in the workspace, right? Now we have gone to the SQL endpoint, right, Nicola?
Yes, we go to the SQL endpoint of the Lakehouse, and essentially there is the option to create a visual query. That's something new. So visual query, for all of you who love data flows and Power Query, you will also love visual SQL queries because this provides kind of very similar experience. So you can use your drag and drop magic and graphical user interface to become a SQL ninja, and everything will be performed in the background. So all of these transformations that you are currently showing, there will be a SQL code generated in the background. So for you as an end user, everything looks like you are in Power Query, but basically it creates a SQL code in the background, which will be executed as a SQL statement once you trigger the execution of the query. And I think it's a great, not just from the point of view of the laziness or efficiency, but also for someone who wants to learn. Yeah, no, I'm serious now. I'm usually not serious, but now I am. So for learning the code, basically you can open and see the SQL query generated behind, and then it's a great starting point for learning how SQL works in the background.
So now in this case, this was still not SQL, right? I just used Power Query and whatnot, right?
Yeah,
Now here is the trick, right?
here is the SQL. Yeah,
So now let's kind of pause this as a second, right? So, wait, sorry, hold on. So this was the original SQL, right? Now, once we look at the right one that we created,
yeah,
it created
yeah.
some gnarly SQL, right?
Exactly. I mean, look, if you're a SQL developer, this looks ugly and probably you can write this in a more optimal way. But hey, someone did the job for you, so I would be happy. So, and again, you can try to understand what this code performs, and step by step, if you want, of course, if you have these intentions to move more to a code first approach, you can learn how SQL works from this script. And again, as I said, if you don't know, you're still good to go. And this is a great enhancement for citizen developers.
So essentially, now I can not only see the SQL code, but I can take the SQL code from here. And if I'm going to create a view, it just allowed me to create a view.
Yeah, yeah. And then
You can
this view
save it.
can be, yeah. Sorry, Shabnan, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you can save it, and then you can even share it with your other coworkers.
So now essentially, like, that odd request you get for the folks, hey, I want that customer information, but I want this 5 columns added, right? And you don't really want to bloat your Power BI model, what they export to Excel from there. So the question becomes, is this allows you a very easy way to give them that outlet, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, for the next one, you know what? This is close to my heart, right? So this one we'll do live. How about that? This is close to my heart. So here we are looking at the same customer, right? So now from here, we're going to click on, let's go to DBO views and see this is the customer query, the view that we created, right? Now, I don't want to code and get the data. There's a way I can get the SQL endpoint and whatnot. I don't want to learn all that stuff. So all I'm going to do is let's create a new visual query. And in the new visual query, I will insert that into Canvas.
You lazy guy.
Yeah, that part I haven't quite figured out. I consider myself lazy, but
He's
and
going
I am
full
very
low
lazy.
code. No code.
But somehow still work doesn't get a
Of course, as long as it works.
So now I have that and I want to get this into Excel. You see this nice button called download Excel file. And once we do that, it downloaded something. Let's go open that. And it says enable editing and enable content. And here is the beauty of it, right? It's gonna ask, whoops, I
It's
cannot.
gonna ask, why didn't you write SQL code by hand?
Well,
I just
yeah, it always happens when you're trying to show, right? Hold on, let's see. I don't know what I clicked on, but let's see. Refresh all. See, I am getting a weird looking thing, so I cannot really see what the error is, funny enough.
Okay, we know it
Hold
was
on.
live. We believe you. You did this live.
Hold on. I think I have a version of that. Let's see if this one works. The one that I was kind of doing earlier. Data refresh. There you go. So what essentially is happening is when we brought the data in, the download, what's happening is if I click on queries and connections, for of us that use Power Query and whatnot, it actually sent the Power Query with it,
Mhm.
right? So essentially, from that perspective, not only this gets the data export to Excel, but it does something better than export to Excel, meaning that person can just open it and hit refresh, and they're gonna be good to go.
And you can save this, right, for
Oh, sorry,
later.
my
You can.
other screen is on this side. Let me show you. Let's see. This is what it shows up on the other side, right? So in Power Query, when it came through, it sent the query back with it. Sorry, Shabnam, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you can save it for later. So next time you don't have to redo the same thing. You can save that Excel file and you'll have that same functionality next time.
Perfect. And just hit refresh, and it works perfectly fine. All right. With that, let's jump back onto the presentation. And again, the idea is, I think, from a performance perspective and speed perspective, this has been a significant boost for me and my team. And what we see, what do you see, Nicola and Shabnam, like in terms of like going from just simply Power BI alone to having this full on Fabric capability?
So to me, this last thing that you showed with Excel is a key part because before you could only connect Excel to Power BI models. And then
Correct.
you would run into what you exactly said. I'm missing those two columns. What do I do now? But now you can connect Excel through the SQL endpoint, is what you did, to the data in the lake. So that's an incredible improvement. And all of it you did with low code. So that is a huge productivity improvement.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I
yeah,
think that's
totally
kind of
agree.
what I
Totally
find
agree.
exciting about Fabric, right? So essentially, as we were kind of mentioning before, right? What we showed you is actually a snippet of what this was built, right? Not necessarily dummy, right? So this is the entire orchestration and things like that running as you can see it, right? So Nicola, like, have you seen performance difference in terms of not really like technical performance, but necessarily like business performance wise, like how it's easier to get things done, to get to the end result and reduce error and fix stuff faster?
Yeah, absolutely. And Shabnam was spot on. So I totally share this opinion. Now this time to analysis has been significantly reduced because these developers who are creating now analytic solutions, they are not stuck, so they can do things on their own, even if they are not coders, if they are low code or no code first approach people, they can build their solutions to satisfy various business requirements. So I think this is a huge boost. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So I think that's kind of what we see in general, right? I think from a perspective Fabric, and this was not a joke when I say like you can take your skill set that you have today and take it to the next level. And the beauty of it is, I think this is something I think Nicola or Shabnam both mentioned earlier, that this is not only for no code and low code, but pro code as well. As you get different folks kind of working in the same playground, they can work with you at the same time. So it doesn't have to become, hey, this is a small estate where all the low code people are playing around with, and this is the pro code, but all your business users, depending on like, regardless of capability, they're getting more empowered to be able to get to questions and get stuff done and work with each other. And what I think from a collaborative perspective, that's a humongous productivity boost. And that's why I kind of see, especially the folks that are on Power BI Premium and whatnot, you're already on Fabric. And even the folks that are not on Fabric, you can get Fabric for less than $300 a month, right? So from that perspective, it's easy way to build a scalable thing that as you build on will be the key to your growth and whatnot. Doesn't require kind of going back and figuring stuff out again.
Mhm.
Any other thoughts? I haven't been paid as much attention to the questions. I think you guys have paid much better attention to that.
I see Shankar responded to a couple of questions. I also tried. I also. I'm not sure if I missed someone's question. I answered to some, but yeah.
All right. So with that, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I think one last thing is we are actually going to be in Orlando this year. All Nicola is going to be there as well, but Nicola's running a separate webinar at the same time. If
You
you
don't
happen
want to
to
marketing me, right?
what
Where's Nicola's marketing?
Nicola went and signed up for another one at the same time, so this one has to be me and Shabna. We'll try to see if we can
You're
swap
already
Nicola out with
famous.
somebody else.
Now I'm leaving. Now I'm leaving.
But
Just kidding, of course. Yeah.
like I said, if we are in Orlando in October, we are going there for Summit North America, the community summit for dynamics and whatnot. We have a full day session. We'll do this end to end for folks that are trying to convert from like Power BI skills to Fabric. We'll show you how to leverage that and whatnot. That's kind of going to be fully in person, like hands-on session and things like that. But apart from that, it's LinkedIn. The easiest way to get a hold of us is to probably find us on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, do put it in the comments chat. We'll pay attention to it, and then we'll try to get back to it as early as we can. And any last thoughts, Nicola?
No, I really enjoyed, and I think this can be useful to a lot of people who are considering working with Fabric. And it was a pleasure to share the stage with both of you. And thanks everyone for joining. I hope it was useful.
Thank you, Nicola. Shabnam?
Yeah, thank you for hosting us, Khaled, and thank you everyone for joining. Hope you enjoyed. And I would like to leave this one message for you, which is, even though Fabric is huge and has so many parts, you don't have to know all of it to get started and be productive. You can just work with one or two items and get a lot done. So don't let that amazing, vast number of items overwhelm you.
I don't think I can come up with anything better than that. So, as Shabnam mentioned, go ahead and get started. Try to use it for what you need today and then figure out the rest. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you. Bye.